Good morning and welcome to the Paul Green Comedy Podcast. It is May 13th, 2024. This is episode 167 of the PaulCast. Stand-up comedian and actor and dreamer coming to you, documenting my journey as I just try to figure out what the heck I'm doing as a comedian navigating this industry and this art form and all of the ups and downs, the highs and the lows, the peaks and the valleys as I continue to move forward. So yesterday, happy Mother's Day to all of you mothers out there from yesterday. And so what happened yesterday? I had an opportunity to do my open mic, which I started producing back in about October or so at a improv comedy club called NCT, the Neighborhood Comedy Theater in downtown Mesa, Arizona. And it is a sort of unique open mic format. And I totally ripped it off. It was not my idea. It is not original. But when I was living in Los Angeles about 5 or 6 years ago, a buddy of mine, or who became a buddy of mine, named Joe Menente, who is an incredibly funny comedian, he really invented this open mic format, which the genesis of it was really to take all of the elements of doing open mics that are really just inconvenient and frustrating for stand-up comedians. And any of you out there who maybe aren't stand-up comedians or don't really know the inner workings of the stand-up comedy world, it's pretty brutal for any stand-up comedian who isn't really famous, or any stand-up comedian who hasn't already been in the game for many, many years and has built some sort of client base, whether that be like a corporate client list or maybe churches or colleges. If you are a hit amongst colleges, then you can do pretty well. Cruise ships. Other than sort of those, there's kind of the big five in terms of ways that you can make money as a stand-up comedian doing stand-up comedy and not being famous. So those are pretty much it. If you can build a corporate client list, if you can get into the church, like the Christian church comedy market does pretty well, cruise ships, colleges, to some extent, military tours. If you can get like on the USO tour, you can do okay. Getting to a position to where you can make a living at any of those really takes a tremendous amount of work, but it can be done. Besides that, or being famous, there is just this whole other sea of stand-up comedians who are trying to develop an act, develop connections, trying to, get a big break, trying to get on television, trying to maybe get an agent or a manager who can book them. If you're not famous, like trying to get gigs at clubs, even the big clubs like, the Improvs or the Laugh Factories, these kind of famous clubs, even if you get booked at them, you're really not making a lot of money. If you're a feature act, you're probably getting paid somewhere between like $20 and like $75, to do a set. And, if you can only do a couple of those sets in a week, right? So in terms of actually making money, that's like, oh yeah, I can live off of this. This is a career now. It really is just not very easy to do that. And and to go along with that, as you're trying to develop an act and trying to get funny, really the only avenue for you to develop an act is open mics. Again, this is if you are anywhere from new to, new to like not famous or, not like a professional touring college act or, corporate comedian, military, etc. So what does all of this mean? So as you are developing that act, trying to, write material and get material that's consistently funny, that would even be bookable to begin with, you're doing a ton of open mics. Now, when I was living in Los Angeles, there's dozens and dozens of open mics. They are all over the place all the time, from just independently produced open mics to all of the big clubs all have some sort of open mic opportunity. Now, the big famous clubs in Los Angeles, you have the Comedy Store, of course, which is, iconic. And you have the Laugh Factory, you have the Hollywood Improv. Those are kind of the big three. You also have like the Ice House over in Pasadena. And that's just sort of like the top tier stand-up comedy clubs. And then you have a whole other level of maybe smaller or less famous clubs that are still fully functioning stand-up comedy clubs, running shows every night. And they all have their open mics. Now, to do an open mic, I'll just take let's just take the Laugh Factory, for example. So the Laugh Factory offers one open mic a week, and it's on Tuesday nights. If I remember right, it's at 6 p.m. And there's pretty much two ways to potentially get on the Laugh Factory open mic in Hollywood, California. The first way is if you show up for the open mic and you are one of the first 10 comics to show up, then you are guaranteed to get 2 minutes of stage time at the Hollywood Laugh Factory. 2 minutes. So what will happen is comedians who want to get those 2 minutes of stage time at the Laugh Factory will literally start showing up around noon or 1 p.m. and they'll wait outside for 4 or 5 hours to do an open mic. Now they are guaranteed a spot. And by the way, I did do that once, maybe twice, where I just waited outside. Just sat there on the concrete on the corner of Sunset and I can't remember the cross street. Maybe it's Vine. And just waited until the Laugh Factory opened up, and then got my name on the list. And so I got 2 minutes of stand-up comedy time. So for every other comedian who doesn't want to wait that long, well, then you can show up anytime, before 6 o'clock. And then you can actually just put your name in a bucket. And then it's a lottery style. Well, they will literally just pull names out of the bucket for about 7 or 8 more spots. And by the way, a good 35, 40 comics will show up and put their name in the bucket. So you've got like a 20, 25% chance of getting your name drawn. So I had tried that maybe another 4 or 5 times where I just showed up because I didn't want to wait 5 hours. I don't think I ever got my name drawn in the lottery portion. If I did, I don't remember getting it drawn, but I did show up early once. I feel like I did that open mic. I may have only done it once. I can't remember, but anyway. So that's just one example of the type of inconvenience it is to do an open mic as a stand-up comedian. I mean, that's specifically in Los Angeles. Now, in other places, it's, I mean, I can't speak for all markets, but, the Phoenix market, you really have a couple of formats for open mics. The number one is the lottery style, which is kind of what the Laugh Factory is. The only difference in like Arizona, there isn't the we'll wait outside for 6 hours and you'll get a guaranteed spot. It's really only the lottery portion where you just put your name in a bucket and they'll just start drawing names throughout the night, and you just wait there and hope your name gets drawn. The other format is just the good old sign-up list. The host or whatever will put up a sign-up a certain amount of time before the open mic. Let's just say it's like 30 minutes before. So all these comics show up and wait for the list to go up, and then they go try to write their name down on the list. And sort of the downside to that is comics now know about when they're going to go up in the lineup. And it's usually a long lineup. Sometimes there will be 20, 25 names on these lists. And so, if a comic is like 18th, they aren't going to just sit there and sit through 17 comics before them. So usually comics will write their name down and then just leave, or they'll go outside and they'll smoke, or they're, go smoke weed or whatever. And then they'll kind of file back in around the time where they actually need to go up. So as a comic, you're trying to get up and do your time, but chances are, the room isn't necessarily going to be full because comics are going to sort of be coming and going. Almost all open mics, it's very rare to have audience in there. I mean, some do a decent job of getting a couple audience members to hang out and check out, some amateur comics. But yeah, it's not super common. A lot of times you really are just performing for the other comics, and sometimes you'll be waiting 2-3 hours to get your 5-minute set in. So it just really is a pretty brutal, inconvenient experience to try to get these open mics. And again, really the only major markets that I've done open mics, obviously Los Angeles. I've done a bunch of open mics in Phoenix. I've done open mics in Las Vegas. The Vegas mics that I did were a sign-up sheet. So I signed up for one open mic. The open mic started at 10 p.m. I ended up doing my time at around 12:45 a.m. So almost 3 hours later. Before it was my turn. I did an open mic in Houston at the Houston Improv. That mic was a sign-up list. I don't think that was a lottery. And then I did an open mic in Mobile, Alabama. And that was also a sign-up sheet. There wasn't a lot of people, if I remember right. There was maybe like 10 or 12, and it was in the attic of this old school bar in like downtown Mobile, and that was actually pretty fun. So other than that, I'm trying to think if I've done open mics anywhere else in the country. I think those were the only places. So anyway, so about 4 or 5 years ago, when I was still living in Los Angeles, this comedian named Joe Manente, he started this open mic where he pretty much just tried to alleviate as much of that hassle as possible. And he created this format to where, as a comic, you would actually go online and you would sign up for his open mic online ahead of time. And his open mics were 1 hour long maximum. and he would only allow up to 9 comics to sign up for a 1-hour spot. Every comic got 5 minutes. You just paid $5, and the rule was you show up on time, the mic starts on time, every comic gets 5 minutes. Every comic, the rule is you need to stay for the whole hour, so none of this in and out, taking off until it's your time. And yeah, it only cost $5. And so he got a ton of backlash for this because there's a handful of comics who just have this absolute visceral, righteous indignation that they should ever have to pay to do their comedy, even if it's amateur, working it out comedy. They just think that the world owes them a stage to practice their craft. Doesn't make sense to me, but stand-up comedy isn't necessarily known as a industry that attracts well-adjusted, mentally healthy individuals a lot of times. Excuse me. It's so, whatever. I don't want to get into that in this podcast. But anyway, so he created this open mic, and then what he started doing is he started stacking open mics every hour on the hour to where you could sign up for multiple hours in a night. And this just ended up being a great format for a lot of comics who just wanted to get some reps and get stage time in and just practice their craft. So I started doing those open mics all the time in Los Angeles, where I would sign up for 2 or 3 mics in a night, get 2 or 3 5-minute sets, repetitions of my material. And in 2019, when I was really going for it, I did about 400 sets. That wasn't all open mics. That also included shows that I was doing, but the vast majority of those sets were done at those types of open mics. So when I moved back to Arizona, I was looking for that type of format because there are open mics in Arizona, but they're either those lottery open mics or they're the sign-up open mics. And it's like, I don't want to spend 2 or 3 hours sitting in a room just to potentially get 5 minutes of stand-up in front of other comics who aren't really paying attention anyway. So I created that format, totally ripped it off, was not my idea, totally unoriginal, and started doing that in Mesa back in September. Now, it started out, we were just doing one hour. And so just show up, do the 5 minutes, and then leave. But the goal was to always start adding more time slots. And yesterday we had the first day of having 2 time slots. So we had a 4 p.m. and a 5 p.m. And it turned out really great. We had 2 full open mics. I think there were 4 comics who signed up for both. We signed up for both the 4 and the 5 and got their 2 reps in those 2 hours. And it was really good. The frustrating part for me is I have been working on this bit for about a month now, and it's about marriage and just sort of my thoughts about how I don't understand how people still get married because it's so intense and it's till death do you part and all this stuff. And overall, the bit was going okay, but it just I couldn't quite seem to get it dialed in to the point to where it was hitting consistently across the board. And then the last 2 or 3 times that I tried it, it didn't really seem to be going well at all. Like I was getting a couple laughs, but it kind of felt like it was off from the beginning. Like there was something off about my premise. And I tried it again yesterday at the open mic, and again, there was just something off about it. And so I did that open mic, and this went, I think I think I'm just off. There's something foundationally off about how I'm approaching this stand-up comedy bit that I have been working on, and so I went back to the drawing board. And those who follow the podcast know that I've really been focusing on writing within a certain format. That's really the type of format that most of the most famous comedians, with a few exceptions, are really writing with this sort of format. If you want to know what that format is, you can. I've talked about it a lot over the last month or so. And when I went back to the drawing board, it just said, okay, what am I actually saying? And is what I'm saying fitting within this format? And if so, well, maybe what part of this format maybe isn't as clear. So a brief overview of the format is, you know, you talk about what happened or what you observed as a comedian. You talk about what you thought or what you did within, based off of what you saw or observed. Then you express your opinion on it, and opinions usually need to come through. There needs to be an emotional backing behind your opinion. This is something that I'm learning, is I think a lot of comics try to be intellectual with their opinion. They're trying to be smart about it as opposed to what they feel about it. But if there's not an emotional component or an emotional drive underneath the opinion, it's like, does this confuse you? Does it frustrate you? Does it annoy you? Does it upset you? Then what I'm finding is it makes the joke or the bit a little less meaty, you know? So anyway, I looked at that format and I saw that I was not following it that well, I guess, if I can say. I was being a little loose with the format, I'll put it that way. And so it was just something for me to look at and go, oh, okay, that's why I'm not getting laughs right off the bat, is because I'm not being very clear on these elements of the format. I'm not really stating a clear opinion about it. Or my opinion is not emotionally based, it's intellectually based. And I wasn't really clear about the experience that led me to be talking about this. I'm just kind of talking about it out of nowhere, as opposed to like, hey, I had this thing happen to me, and because this thing happened to me, I was thinking or feeling this thing about marriage, and my opinion about this thing of marriage is rooted in some sort of confusion or an annoyance or, upset me, and then demonstrating and acting out what my opinion is, or why I feel that way, or why I think it's frustrating, or why I think it's confusing. And I was able to see like, oh, I'm not being super clear on these elements, which is why the last 3 times I've tried it. So I tried it Friday night in San Diego, I tried it Saturday night in Phoenix, and then I tried it Sunday at the open mic, all with mixed results. And by mixed, I mean not very good results. And some of those audiences were good audiences. So, it's not fun to be like, oh, what I thought was it just isn't quite it yet. And having the humility and the drive to go, well, I could just keep doing it this way and just trying to make little tweaks, which is what I was doing, or I could just look at this and go, okay, I think I'm missing some fundamentals here. Let's rewrite this and get more clear with those fundamentals and see if I can find a different way to talk about this topic in a manner that will be more clear and more precise and get a better response right up front. It's like I wasn't getting big laughs up front. I was starting to get laughs, where about 2 or 3 jokes in, or where I thought the jokes were. So after that open mic, I finally had to go, okay, I just need to rewrite this again. And that really is the process of comedy. There's that phrase, writing is rewriting. And, and it shouldn't come to a shock to me, but it's just a new standard that I'm setting for myself, which honestly, I didn't really do a good job at that before. I did have a tendency before when I would write something, if it was at all funny some of the time or most of the time, I would just kind of like, okay, well, I know that I can say this, and if I really sell it and I really lean into it, I can get an audience to laugh at it. But once I got it to that point, I would just kind of leave it alone and be like, okay, that's my routine now. That's what I'm going to talk about. And I'm really trying to up my game in that regard and just say, well, no, I want to really keep iterating on this material until I am really confident that I have it dialed into a point to where I'm getting really good laughs right off the bat, just based off the initial premise, those 4 elements, talking about what happened, my honest opinion about it, and that first demonstration, that first act out needs to really hit. And once I get there, then I can start to play in terms of what happens downstream with that bit and what sort of offshoots I go off, as long as that core is well. So I did yet another rewrite, which I've already rewritten it about 4 or 5 times by now. But last night was a pretty drastic rewrite than what I was going for before. So I'm going to try to get to some open mics this week. I have some shows coming up this weekend to where hopefully I will have a pretty good idea of what I want to try and get to test it out at my home club, JP's Comedy Club in Gilbert, where I will be at this weekend. So that is the update here on May 13th, 2024, episode 167. I hope all of you are doing well, pursuing your dreams, making those adjustments, striving to improve, setting standards for yourself, and just going, hey, if something isn't quite where it needs to be, having the humility to go, well, I need to just keep iterating. And I think that's what it takes. That's the process. That's what we signed up for. All right, everybody. Keep going for those dreams, and let's try not to get too discouraged. I have had to look at that and go like, I get a little down on myself when, I'm trying these jokes and they aren't going as well as I want them to. And instead of just going, hey, it didn't go as well as I wanted to. So that just means rewrite it. Doesn't mean I need to quit. Doesn't mean I'm not funny. It doesn't mean whatever. It just means, oh, cool. The first couple of iterations are going well. Let's keep iterating until they do go well, and then go from there. So keep at it, everybody. Love you all so much, and I will talk to you tomorrow at the Paul Green Comedy PaulCast. We'll see you then.